Welcome to Carrying Wayward, a supernatural podcast for fans who aren't ready to let go and newcomers to the series who are ready to jump in. I'm Drew Schulman.
And I'm Marie Vigourou. In this minisode, we're going to channel our own angel radio to answer voicemails. Let's get this show on the road. So this is a bit of a new one for us, right? Like we had some extra voicemails that we really wanted to be able to answer. And we also had some feedback that so many listeners have told us that like they really love listening to the voicemails. So we figured that we would do that so that we can continue this conversation, right? During our hiatus.
I love that we're doing this. I have come to really enjoy mailbag episodes on shows I listen to. So I'm so happy to be doing this. As a reminder for anyone listening today, if you would like to submit a voicemail or a message to us, you can record that on any device of your choice, like your phone, and just email that recording or that message to us at carryingwayward@gmail.com.
We had a lot of overflow of voicemails. In some instances, I think people also script them, so they script record. So we just wanted to really honor that and make sure that we don't get too far behind, right? Because I don't know, sometimes I wonder if some people who sent us voicemails just never actually heard their own voicemails, and it makes me sad to think about that. So we're overdue for these episodes that we are calling Angel Radio, actually.
Which we're far enough into the series now that I know what that reference is, because it was brought up really early on in like production. And I was like, and you I think you would have said like, oh, you'll figure out what it means eventually. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, because when we started and we, were talking about the voicemail segment, and I was like, and if ever we have extra voicemails, which will never happen, by the way, because we were like really, really like scrounging for them at the beginning, right? We were reading tweets and whatnot that people had like sent us.
Gosh, I forgot we did that.
Yeah, we did that. And now like we have an overflow of them. And I was so excited that one day we would be able to call these episodes Angel Radio. And it seemed so far away and so improbable. And here we are.
I'm so proud of us. I love it. I'm so proud of everyone else who supported us and is sending in these voicemails, because I've said it before and I'll say it again. One of my favorite segments of the show myself is just, it's so much fun to like get these curveball questions that lead us down these amazing rabbit holes and tangents and conversations. So I'm curious to see how this is going to go today then.
Well, with that, let's start with our first voicemail for this episode from Rebecca.
Hello, Marie and Drew. My name's Rebecca. I was listening to your podcast of 710 Death's Door when we go through all of Bobby's memories and we get to learn more about him. And as you guys were talking, it got me thinking, and I had a new headcanon just pop up in my head as you guys were talking, and it's about the hunter's initiation. So we know that most hunters they don't choose the life chooses them, and it sucks them in, right? Based on some traumatic experience. They're Sam and Dean were pulled in because of what happened to their mom. Garth was pulled in because he had to kill the Tooth Fairy. Stuff like this. There's usually some personal traumatic experience that makes you a hunter. And we all thought that Bobby's was when he had to kill his wife, which was from what we know from past episodes, one of the most difficult and traumatic things he's had to experience. What's interesting to me is that doesn't show up in his memories. That's not something that pops up. And Rufus is like, no, we need to go deeper. We need to go to the hard stuff, the difficult stuff. And it's not barely brought up. It's just brought up once there's like, oh, she got possessed 3 days later. But we don't see it. It's like, which makes me think, that he's healed and perhaps, he's moved on from that, which is good. But we find out later that the more painful memory is when he had to kill his father. And depending on your definition of a monster, I think that Bobby has been a hunter since he was a kid when he had to kill his dad. I think that was his hunter's initiation because he did it to protect his mom. And depending on your definition of a monster, and it was a painful, traumatic experience that he buried or, scarred him. I would love to hear your guys' take on that, or if you think I'm completely off base or anything like that. Anyway, love the podcast. Keep it going. I'm always itching for more episodes, so I can't wait. And let me know if you're going to do the Winchesters. I'm assuming you are. Have a great night. Bye.
Starting off light and easy, I can tell, love that for us. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for this truly disturbing voicemail. I mean, in the best way, right? Like, this is one of those like extremely hot, terrible, sad takes that I kind of love because, oh my gosh, I mean, the definition of a monster is something that we have talked about a lot, right? And so I have always kind of like hinted and said that my opinion about this definition of what and who is a monster isn't always very clear cut, and it's not always necessarily linked to the supernatural. So this idea that the first monster that Bobby killed is actually his father makes so much sense to me. And hurts my heart so much because Bobby, I mean, we love Bobby, right? Now, obviously, that makes me think also about John and the boys' relationship with monsters and how that maybe changes the way that we think of how the boys were brought into the supernatural. So, like, obviously, we know that it's because of Mary's tragic death, but it does make me wonder, we kind of like rethink John with this new framework of like Bobby's dad was a monster, because then I'm like, of course, John has to be considered a monster as well, right? If we're doing it, if we're thinking in that kind of framework. It's not often that a voicemail leaves me kind of speechless, but this one really does. And I'm not entirely sure what to do with that, especially on an episode where we're supposed to just answer voicemails. So Drew, I'm going to give that back to you for a second.
Hell of an opener for this one. I really thought I knew where this voicemail was going. And like I started forming a thought, I have notes, and then like I said, you threw us a curveball, and I'm loving it as much as, like Mary said, it hurts. Because I think it does two really big things. One, it sets up something we've talked about before in a very subtextual way while making it very, like, doing as much as they can to show without telling that the show understands that what a monster is the actions taken, not the facts of your birth or what you are. Like, his father was that first monster. I am fully agreeing with you on this one. But I want to also touch on the fact that we don't see in Bobby's memories in this episode him going back to the traumatic moment we all sort of expected of his having to kill his own wife. And I think by that point, he had divorced himself from he understood enough to divorce what he was doing from who was physically there. Because he knows what a monster is and is able to see the monster is the actions and this entity, not his wife. So the traumatic part of losing his wife was not that he had to physically kill this thing in her body, and by extension her, but it was the fact that they had this fight beforehand. I kind of love this, the fact that like it's clearly a traumatic memory. There's no way we're going to go like, you killed your wife and aren't traumatized by it. But it didn't stick to him the same way killing his father did or having the fight with her did. Because those are the ones that hurt him more and were more... It was the part of the whole thing that made it more real to him. It was what really stuck with him more than the having to ultimately kill her. Genuinely, an amazing amount of thought and reflection on this, looking back now. Like, these things that did not click in the first viewing that I now get to do because of you, Rebecca. So... genuinely crazy strong start to this Angel Radio episode, but damn was it a banger.
It also brings back, Kripke's thesis statement about how family is hell. Again, if we're adding that to the framework, then by definition, his father, was a monster, like a demon, right? And that's what he killed. Like, the father was the demon, and the demon was not possessing his father. Like, there's that difference there that I think is notable. to speak to what you were saying, Drew, about like being able to divorce like the entities when it comes to his wife. So again, Rebecca, thank you so very much for kicking off this Radio episode with a bang.
And if I can just answer something you brought up, Mary, I also want to go back and almost like reframe something that was said in the voicemail and by you, in that I don't think the moment Sam and Dean became hunters was the death of their mother and this whole journey starting. It started them on a road, but the moment they became hunters, I don't know if we ever learn about Sam's, but I know through context and through conversation that Dean's was a hunt, his first solo hunt he was sent on by John, which I think almost does the same thing where, like, yes, the thing he had to kill was a monster, but the monster that put him in that position and forced him to become a hunter was John.
Absolutely.
Next up, we have a message from Angel. Angel writes, "This will be structured in a weird way because I have a lot of small things to point out, none long enough for a full email on their own. Starting with the fact that y'all are so close to getting me in trouble. I listen to the podcast at work, even though I'm not supposed to. Sometimes there's a sad realization or something that nearly makes me squeal, but right now, it's all the damn dick jokes. I have to bite my cheek every time because I can't laugh. I probably look crazy. Second, My Bloody Valentine in Season 5, it aired in 2010. A movie of the same name starring Jensen Ackles as the killer aired in 2009. Make of that what you will. Lastly, before My Secret with Mary in Abandon All Hope in Season 5, Bobby, Sam, and Dean burned the photo they took with Joe and Ellen. Y'all wondered why, and I think I know. Their bodies were blown away. The boys have nothing to do a hunter's funeral with. The picture was the closest thing they could use. Love you guys. Keep it up."
Thank you so much, Angel, for this lovely email. So I read the secret little paragraph there. I'm definitely keeping that in mind, and I'm gonna see if I can deliver on that for you. So that's my my slight little promise. First off, I really hope that you're, not getting yourself in trouble at work. And sorry about the dick jokes, I guess. It does get better. We stopped joking about dicks. But we do make a lot of really sad realizations about Dean and Benny in season 8. So apologies about that. For the Bloody Valentine comment, I think that it would make sense if it was a nod to it, right? Because the show has in the past like done little things that kind of like hinted at like the actors like past acting jobs. For example, like the little comment about Gilmore Girls when they're I can't remember the title of the episode, Hollywood Babylon, right? When they're on the tour and they're like, we're gonna get on the set of Gilmore Girls, and Jared looks absolutely terrified. So that's the thing that happens on this show. There's also like the Paris Hilton appearance that was connected to Jared. There was also like a Chad Michael Murray. Yes, there you go. A Chad Michael Murray kind of like comment because they knew each other as well. So, and that's all in season 1. So it would make sense to me that this was a thought out thing. And then for your comment about Abandon All Hope, I honestly think it makes a lot of sense, right? Like the picture is like the proxy for the body, which is incredibly sad, but also like makes a lot of sense when it comes to like the way that we experience grief and the way that we cope with grief and do that, and wanting to honor their memories the way that they do in this particular culture, I suppose, this hunting community. So thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. Actually, I know that I didn't appreciate like the burning of the picture when it happened, but I have to say that reading this does make me feel a little bit better. So thank you so much for that.
This was a really, really fun message, Angel. As someone who listens to a lot of podcasts on public transit, the looks I have gotten from strangers as I have either found myself crying on a bus or a beach, or laughing out loud, like legitimately like spilling my drink over. Hopefully you are safe at work and being good. Yes, the dick jokes do stop after the final one explodes everywhere. We kind of stop talking about them. So I had to look up My Bloody Valentine to see if there was anyone else in the cast I knew, and not really, but I realize now I've seen this movie. Like, this is definitely one of those, like, it was on Halloween one night on whatever channel I had, and I just watched it. Did not ever click that it was Jensen. I need to go back and, like, re-see clips of it now. But I remember this.
A lot of people watched it. I remember watching My Bloody Valentine. I think that there's a scene in a hot tub at one point. Like, that's what I remember. And I remember because my parents got a hot tub in their house, not in the house, but like they got a hot tub like literally like months later. And I was just like, oh no, I'm not going in there.
Alternatively, just near the hot tub, hopefully no Jensen Ackles coming stabbing. And lastly, I really, really like, this is one of those things I love. I think this is like the secret thing about the voicemails I love the most is when we get to revisit a small snippet from an episode that we either like just missed or didn't get to bring up. And I think in this case, we both kind of just didn't consider it away. And it's rarely for a lack of trying, but for the fact that there's so much to cover in such a... I mean, we go for like up to an hour sometimes, but we really do limit ourselves. That like little things like this get overlooked, but you're so right. The idea that they couldn't give them the proper Hunter send-off that they so rightfully deserved. Like, it feels like... I can't think of another franchise or media piece right now, but like those things where it's like, oh no, we have to make sure to like give him a proper burial before we move on to show our respects to their heritage or their culture or their ways. This was their version of that. It was like, yes, they had a hero's, like self-sacrifice moment, but they needed to have a proper goodbye to them. And this was their way of doing it. Is just incredibly sad and beautiful. As for your secret with Mary, I have no idea what it is, but I'm assuming at some point I may find out or be let in on the secret. But until then, if you have a secret for me that I can keep from Mary, let me know.
Drew's feeling left out with people.
I want secrets.
He wants secrets.
Secrets. We love the secrets.
Mash him, boil him, put him in a stew. I do want to mention, because you were talking about how you listen to podcasts on public transit. I listen to podcasts on my run. And I did a thing not too long ago where I listened to Non-Human Biologics episode with Chris and Jeremy. And Jeremy kind of like offhandedly mentioned it's not as bad as somebody buying you a horse to buy your affections. And I screamed, like out on the street running, I screamed, and people turned around and were like, what is going on? I'm like, I swear I'm fine. I'm like, I tripped.
Oh, good excuse. I
was like, I tripped, I'm fine, I'm okay. And if you want to know the horse story, you should definitely go listen to Rude Eats. That's all I'm going to say.
I only know the reference you made in the Discord, so I'm like only like halfway there, but I need to start Rude Eats. It's on the list.
And our final voicemail for today is from Linnea.
Hi, Drew. Hi, Marie. I wanted to come on and say a short thank you for the podcast, for continuing to be a representation and a light in the After Series fandom, for your LGBTQ representation and interpretation. I also want to thank you both for the use of understanding language in your gendered language, such as female presenting or male presenting versus just saying male or female. As a non-binary human, I appreciate the care you give your words. As for the topic I want to speak on today, it is potentially spoilery, and so now is a great time to pause if you haven't gotten to Season 7, Episodes 17 and 22. All right. I would love to talk about the fandom reaction, but more specifically the representation of Castiel coming back and then immediately taking on Sam's suffering, trial, or trauma from Lucifer. This iteration of Cass is by far my favorite and is known by the fandom as Honeybee Cass. The depiction and representation throughout the season 7 and 8 of mental illness and mental health is something I can't wait for your further discussion and opinions on. As someone who was institutionalized and medicated from a young age, this representation, while not perfect, has some very important meaning to me during my high school and early college years. And on rewatch during COVID kept me sane. Like many others, I'm sure. I love to hear your opinions on the representation of mental health trauma as expressed by Sam versus the expression from Cass. Thank you so much for your time. As always, keep calm, carry on, and thank you again for the podcast. It keeps me going every week. P.S. Mary, I see what you're doing every time you say words that are supposedly just empty, but happen to be full of trauma. Sometime we should all play a game of sorry. All my love. Have a wonderful week.
Linnea, thank you. This was a very, very heartfelt and wonderful message to get. I'm glad we can bring a smile to you in that way, and that you enjoy the show, and that, you know what, it's one of those things that, like, at least for myself, I try really hard to be very careful with my language, and I know I slip up. I have a few friends who, I have a friend who only, like, very recently corrected me in my use of pronouns, because it never really came up that they were non-binary or used they them pronouns. And it was just one of those things where it's like, how did you let me do this wrong for so long? And they were just like, I just didn't feel like correcting you. And I'm like, no, you have to correct me. So I try. So thank you for recognizing. And if ever I've messed up or made a mistake, please call me out. And you know, it was never intentional. As far as the actual, like, the core of your question, I know we talk about it when we get to those episodes, but I've always felt that in that whole Cass taking Sam's mental illness away, it really diminished it for Sam as a storyline, while then giving Cass a much better version of the storyline that I kind of wanted Sam to go through. Like, I really wanted to see Sam, like, learn to cope with it or find ways to work with it. And, like, they kind of do, but it really feels like a way to hand wave it away so they can get through the story until they need it to pop up again. But yes, it does give us Honeybee Cass, which, yes, I understand and I adore. And it's one of those little, like, things that have stuck with me now, the images of honeybees and Cass and some other images I've seen in that vein. But I really do like the way they depict Cass. And again, that's coming from me, who doesn't have a very first-hand experience with that kind of environment. Like, I do deal with my own mental health, but I've never had to deal with it in a way like Cass is presented as dealing with it. So hearing from someone who has a closer connection to that world, like yourself, to speak about that and let us know that it was done in a way that was done right by you, makes me feel really good being able to enjoy it more. So I'm going to turn the tables and thank you for letting us share in that point of view and bringing that perspective that at least I don't have to me, to let me better understand and appreciate the show and our little bumblebee Cass. So thank you.
Linnea, what can I say? I always wondered, ever since I took on that burden. I mean, when I started this podcast, I always wondered how much it would change me, and it turns out that it has. So starting off this way, thank you so very much for this voicemail. It's really quite lovely. Thank you for appreciating or noticing the language that we use. As someone who is also non-binary, I find this quite important, and also just, I don't know. It's close to my heart as well. So thank you for noticing. When it comes to the difference in how Sam and Cass kind of like handle their mental health, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind, or that came to my mind when I heard you just kind of like discussing it, is just like how long-standing Cass's issues have been, particularly because a lot of Cass's mental health issues, I think, can at least be traced back to the number of times that he's been reprogrammed, right? And, you know, we will never know what Cass's mental health looks like without this deprogramming and reprogramming. The thing about Cass is that, like, we will never really know how much of his mental health issues are like come from this time that he has spent being deprogrammed and reprogrammed, right? So it's like that for me, that kind of is what jumps up for Cass. Whereas for Sam, I think just in part because his life has been so much shorter, but also because he has had Dean's potentially very positive influence in his life, I think has been able to find more ways of coping with his mental health issues by himself rather than Cass, who simply had to hide it. And I think that there's a nuance there that's a little bit different in the way that like Sam and Cass handle their mental health issues. And I have to say that overall, one of the things that and I think I've said this also on the podcast, but one of the things that I dislike about the way that mental health is portrayed in this particular show, and that's more of a critical aspect of this, is the fact that like you can just give it away, right? Like somebody can just take on your mental health issues, right? And so, of course, in a world where you can just fix anybody's literal physical ailments, it makes sense to extend that to mental ailments as well. But it just always kind of rubbed me the wrong way to do it that way, because I feel like that those are not the same kinds of issues. One of them can be fixed relatively well, whereas the other ones like is a lot harder and demands self work. And I don't know, I feel like maybe what I'm saying right now says more about me than it does about the show, but I'll let you all psychoanalyze me if you feel like doing that. So thank you so much, Linnea, for this lovely voicemail, and I hope that you also have a lovely week.
Well, that brings us to the end of our first Angel Radio episode. I would like to give just a general thank you to everyone sending in voicemails, and again to Rebecca, Angela, and Linnea for, being the ones that luckily got chosen for today's episode, but they were 3 lovely messages, so thank you.
Absolutely. And Drew, can you remind people where they can find you during our hiatus?
Yes, the best place to find me will be on Twitter at Boxless Thought. I'll be sharing anything I'm working on between now and the start of season 9 there. And Mary, what about you?
For me, you can find me on Twitter at MaryTurner_. You can also find other podcasts that I'm working on at Rude Eats, and also the Gentleman Pirates Library if you're interested in Hannibal or Our Flag Means Death. You can definitely go have a listen to these podcasts. This was Carrying Wayward, a supernatural podcast produced by Rochelle Castellano, hosted by Drew Schulman and Marie Vigourou. Thank you to everyone supporting us on Ko-fi or Patreon, especially our bunker supporters, Elle, Jeremiah Thomas, and Simone. We'd also like to thank Jake Lionheart for our music and Jacqueline Tucci for additional sound editing. Head over to carryingwayward.com to become a patron or a Ko-fi subscriber, and for our merch store and our socials. And write us a review on Apple Podcasts. Carry on, our wayward friends.